So following on in our videos about diagnostics, this is the next one. So assuming you've watched the first one, you've got your complaint and you've gathered evidence from the driver of the vehicle, the next stage is to try and categorize the fault that you're dealing with. I generally split them into 4 categories. The first of those is feedback. So a feedback fault being something that is the car producing a feedback to you in some form, vibration or a noise or a nasty smell. Remember earlier I was saying about using your senses. It might be smoke, which you can see, a smell that you're using your nose. You feel a vibration through the car. All these things are feedback faults. And they're the ones that I categorize as a generic term. It covers a lot of faults on cars which otherwise can't be described. Then you've got drivability faults. These are the most common ones. So it's losing power, or the clutch is slipping, it won't go up hills, or it's holding back, the brakes are binding, or it won't select gear properly. All of these problems, the main thing that the car was designed to do is drive along the road with people in it. So any faults recurring from a drivability fault. After you've got drivability problems, you've got interactive problems. So aircon not working, or the stereo's playing up. All the things that the driver interacts with. Steering wheel, all the controls on the steering wheel, maybe the windows and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of faults where you're interacting with the car and you're trying to make things happen. Bear in mind also that a lot of these faults can cross-refer to each other. A drivability fault can also be a feedback fault, so you've got to bear that in mind. And then the last one that I deal with is structure. So that could be corrosion. You could have an MOT failure where the structure of the car is failed from corrosion. You could have rain leaks. Again, the structure of the car is allowing water into the car. Even smells. Again, takes me back to using your senses. So there are structural problems with cars that occur. So it's not so much important to categorize these diagnostic faults into a specific ironclad category, but it's important to try and establish between you and the person that's complaining of the fault what the fault is. And by that I mean, for instance, somebody can come in and they can complain that the car is juddering, and this is something I've seen a lot. They could complain that the car is juddering. You instantly think, well, it's juddering, so it must have a tyre fault or a buckled wheel, suspension fault, something like that. But what they've actually got is a misfire, and the misfire is such a heavy misfire that it's causing a vibration through the car. They described it as juddering. It's not what you would describe as juddering. You would call it a misfire because you're in the trade and you term things differently. So you need to establish that rapport when you're gathering evidence for the diagnostic. What your idea of a feedback fault or a structure fault or a drivability fault is the same as the person that's talking about the fault. Also be aware that all these categories can intermingle. You can have a feedback fault caused by a misfire, a drivability, and vice versa. So it's important to actually understand what fault you're dealing with and what category it falls into. Once you've achieved that, you've got to you've categorized the fault and you start to look into it. You need to figure out a way of investigating those faults, and all the different faults have different ways of dealing with them or being dealt with. So let's say, for instance, it's drivability. These are common ones. Drivability, you generally put your diagnostic tool on there. That'll be one of the first things you do. If it's more interactive, like the lights aren't working, you'll probably be using a multimeter. If you've got a funny noise somewhere, you'll probably be using one of these. A stethoscope, which you can pinpoint noises with, and I use it a lot. I also use it around the engine, but also sometimes for non-starters. I mean, you can put the bottom of this onto the onto the bottom of a fuel tank and listen to see if the fuel pump's running. Lots and lots of ways you can use a stethoscope. Again, goes back to using your senses. You've got a nose, you've got your eyes, you've got your ears, you've got your hands. You can feel heat or cold. You can feel humidity, vapor. Use all of the senses that you've got, not just your brain. So to summarize then, get your problems into categories, decide which category you're going to be investigating, but don't be afraid to back out. Don't be afraid to go, okay, I've exhausted this avenue, I don't seem to be getting anywhere. Let's go back out and approach this from a structure point of view. Let's go and look at it from a drivability point of view. So it's a nice way to divide up your thoughts and your processes and get yourself thinking along different tracks. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you for the next one.